The following story is going to be in a couple of parts because it's so long. Now keep in mind what you hear in this story is going to take some twists and turns. And we're leaving it as it is because the storyteller is telling us what happened with her encounter with a romance scammer and how many lies and stories that built up, and he didn't keep track of what he was telling her. This is how she met Chris on a grief site. This is kind of a crazy story. I first met Chris on FB, and it's where I've met a lot of fake profiles, unfortunately. I was in a grief support group for many years. I lost my mom, and I lost my dad, both to cancer, and it left me feeling really depressed during that time. I joined a couple of different grief and loss and parent loss support groups. Now keep in mind, I'm in my 40s. I'm not young, but my parents were a huge part of my life, and when I started getting depressed, I found it was a great place to meet people and at least kind of share how I was feeling with others, and there was no judgment. Well, I found Chris in this group, but what's interesting about my story is you would think that I would get romance scammed, but that wasn't the case. But when this romance scammer doesn't realize is he actually helped lift me out of one of my depressive states and helped lift me out of depression in a weird way, and started me on a new and adventurous hobby of talking to romance scammers. Now, let me start by saying that in this group, I didn't post a whole lot. I joined the group and introduced myself like every member does, because you have to introduce yourself on the page to stay in the group. And then I would lay kind of dormant. I stay quiet. I read people's stories. Well, there was a story in particular that one member posted about their mom battling cancer and how she had passed. And I replied to her comment saying I was praying for her and was trying to give her some strength. And just let her know that she's not alone in her feelings. And I guess for some reason I just felt like reaching out and posting that there's a lot of stories online with similar issues and similar things going on. And I just felt the need to reach out to the group and reach out to her and tell her she's not alone. The lady replied to my post and to my comment, saying thank you. I really appreciate it. But I also got another reply on my comment. It was a man calling himself Chris. He told me that he thought my comment was very smart and he would like to get to know me better. I thought this was strange because it wasn't meant to be a smart or intelligent comment. It was meant to be uplifting and kind. The kindness of strangers, it can go a long way. Well, fast forward a few days later, because I didn't really reply to him. I just ticked the like and let him know that I had read his message or comment. And I had found in my spam, other message folder on FB, a message from Chris. But I guess he wasn't my friend, so it didn't show up in the normal chat. It showed up in my others/spam folder. In this message, it said, "Hello, dear, my name is Chris. I found your comment very smart, and I would like to get to know you. I hope you don't mind the invasion of your privacy while I send you a message. Please reply back and add me as a friend." Well, my friends list is closed off, and I only have a handful of friends from work and close relatives and some distant relatives and a few friends from my college years. I don't have a ton of friends. I'm not a social butterfly, and I certainly don't judge my worth based on how many friends I have on social media. I think if you were to look at my friends list today, I have maybe 80, and they're all people that I know. So I declined his offer as a friend request and basically wrote him back and told him, "Thank you, Chris, but unfortunately, I don't add people I don't know very well, and people on my friends list are all people I know. So I declined your offer as a friend." And that's basically what I wrote to him and told him thank you. Chris unfortunately wrote back to me and said that, "Why don't you friend people you know?" I told him I don't know you very well, but if you'd like to chat here, I'm fine with doing that. Well, he replied right away and said that I could be his new friend and not to be shy. Don't be afraid to add me as a friend. He wanted me to be his friend, and he told me that he's tried to send me a friend request, but the button failed to go through, which made no sense to me since I thought he has a strange way of putting those words together. Maybe he meant that I denied his request? I told him that even if the button failed to go through, I wasn't going to accept your friend request. I don't know you. I don't let strangers into my social media. Granted, I don't have a ton of photos of myself, and there's certainly no information on there that's going to cause any problems or personal information to leak out to someone, but I just feel like letting someone in your friends list that you don't know is like opening the front door to your house and letting anyone in and hoping they don't do bad to you. I just don't do that. And again, I told him, I'm not interested right now in being your friend. But if you want to chat here, that's fine. I introduced myself to him and told him my age and told him that I live in Georgia. He replied to me saying he thought I was beautiful in my profile picture and it really stunned him. Well, at the time he was talking to me, and looking back on my profile, the picture that was posted at that time was a picture of my dog. And I guess I didn't catch that at the time, or maybe I really wasn't thinking, but I said, well, thank you. He told me that he was a widow. His wife had died from kidney cancer 4 years prior, and that he had joined this grief group to try and get support, and he asked me if I too was a widow. I told him no, and in my head I thought, you said you were a man, so you'd be a widower, but okay. I let him know I was not a widow, and that my parents had passed away, and I was very close to both of them, and during a difficult time in my life, I joined a grief group to try and find support, and I found support, and I guess you could say I was on the other side of the hill. I wasn't grieving as hard, and when I joined the group, I was extremely depressed, and I battled depression from time to time, and I let him know this. I said, losing your parents, it fell me into a depression, and I battled with it, and I battled with mental health from time to time, and I had bouts of depression where I really didn't have the energy, and I just felt down. And he told me he understood and that he was very sad since his wife had passed, and he didn't know how to deal with it. I explained to him that you just don't get over it. You just continue to living your life, and it hurts a little bit less as time goes on. He then told me that he has a daughter, and his daughter's name was Emily. She was 10 years old, and that his daughter was having a hard time after losing her mother to cancer. He said that he was raising her up as a single father. I told him, well, that's very noble of you, and I know it's very hard, but I'm sure that she needs her father now more than ever. Chris told me yes, but she also needs a motherly figure, and that he was single, and he thought he would start dating again, and he was looking for a good, smart, and strong woman like myself. He then asked me if I was married, and I told him no. And I wasn't, and I'm not interested in getting married. Truth be told, I'd been in a bad relationship before and had broken up quite some time back, and I felt a little battle-scarred. I wasn't looking for a man in my life. I wasn't looking for anyone in my life. I had my dog, my house, my job, and I was busy. And to be honest, I still was grieving the loss of my parents, and to understand this, they lived literally down the street from me. I have to deal with the sale of their home, and I have to deal with a lot of things, and I kind of shared that with Chris, which I probably shouldn't have. I told him I was busy working all the time, and I work for the school district, but it's nothing glamorous, trust me, and at my age, yes, I'm one of the school lunch ladies, but I love my job, and the kids are a big part of my life. They're like my little family. And I was telling Chris this, and that I don't want anything to do with the sale of my parents' home, but I'm the person that's going to inherit everything from the sale, including any assets my parents had, and I just don't know why I shared that with him. I probably shouldn't have, but that's just me, and I was feeling vulnerable, and he told me he'd be there to help me in any way possible. He told me that he was an engineer and that he often worked abroad helping to build roads and bridges to underdeveloped countries. In fact, he was getting ready to take a 4-week trip to Nigeria to help and build a construction site of a new bridge. He even sent me a website that showed all the construction work that he does, and I clicked on the website and it showed him, the same photo as his profile, as the building contractor and engineer. And as I said, the photo on his profile was the same photo on the website. I kind of browsed through their website, but I didn't think much of it. I don't usually give people my work website, and honestly, I thought it was kind of strange. It's not like I gave him a link to the school I work at and said, here, have a look. I just told him it was nice, and he seems to be very successful. He then asked me for my photos and asked me for my phone number. I told him I don't give out my phone number to strangers. At least not this early in just getting to know somebody. I didn't know if the fact that I didn't give him my phone number turned him away, or he thought that maybe he could try to talk to somebody else for about a week, but I stopped hearing from Chris altogether, and I went on with my life as I usually do. I didn't think much of it, and then he came back to me again. He asked me how I was, how I've been, how I was doing. It was about 7 or 8 days later, and he acted like we could just pick up where we left off and start chatting. I asked him where he'd been and how he's doing, and wondered if I had said something to upset him, and he told me no, that he had to fly to Nigeria for this big construction project, and he had just left. And since I didn't give him my phone number, he wasn't sure if he'd be able to keep in touch, but fortunately, the hotel he's at had Wi-Fi. So he thought he would reach out to see how I was doing, that he was thinking of me. He said unfortunately the Wi-Fi comes and goes, and he wasn't sure how often he could sit on his laptop and talk to me, and he said he could use my phone number, and asked again if he could have it. And I again told him no, I don't know you that well, but if he wants to share his phone number with me, maybe I'll give him a text when I'm ready to reach out like that, but I would prefer to just talk on Messenger. He agreed and then sent me a bunch of photos of a construction project he's working on, and says he's been there just a couple of days now and that they're getting set up to build this $1 million road project. It's a new road and bridge, and he would be in charge of all the building and all of the workers. Well, I was impressed by this, but something in my gut told me something's wrong. I asked him how his daughter's doing, and he didn't answer. He then said he was very busy and didn't have time to talk, and said if I only would give him my phone number, then he'd be able to reach out more often. I again told him to give him my number. No, but if you give me your number instead, if I feel like reaching out, I will. Otherwise, just text me on Messenger. He said he was going to be very busy again and didn't have time to talk, and I told him, well, take care. And he asked me what I've been doing since we talked last, and asked if I'm dating any men on the internet. I told him, well, we've only not talked for about a week, and sarcastically I said, of course, I'm already married, and I did the little laughing emoji. He didn't get the joke, and he asked if I was serious, and he asked me if I was happy with my new husband, and I told him it was a joke. Well, it went over his head again, and he asked me why a married woman like myself is chatting to him, a single man, and then he asked for a picture of my husband. I again told him I was joking. I'm not married. I don't want to be married. And he said okay, and that he had to get back to his big construction project and he would talk to me later. Well, later came, and that night I received a message from him that he sent more photos as well, showing his big construction project that he said was in Nigeria. So I decided to ask him, well, what part of Nigeria are you working in? He got a little angry and he told me, why do you want to know? Have you been to Nigeria before? Do you know anything about it? Are you familiar with the culture? I told him, no, I was just curious where in Nigeria you were working. I'm trying to make small talk. He told me he was in Abuja, Nigeria, the most beautiful place in Nigeria. And then he sent me a bunch more photos and he asked me if I've ever been here. I told him no, I'm not very familiar with that country, but I do enjoy learning about cultures, and after all, I work in a school, so we're always talking to kids about travel and different places in the world. Even though I'm just a lunch lady, I love to show photos to my kids, and the classrooms that they come into have different photos of places all around the world, and I would love to show them this during their lunch break when I'm serving food. And I thought it was kind of neat to have photos from someone who's in a different country. I told him that maybe I would give the photos to a couple of the teachers that are friends of mine, because at the classrooms they're always doing travel and different kinds of projects, world travel projects for the students. And last year we did a whole travel project about France, and our whole lunchroom was decorated with things from France, and we even tried different French cuisine for the kids as a fun little project. And the students love to learn about new things. Maybe I would save the photos and bring them in at the end of summer. Well, Chris became angry. He told me absolutely not. Those are classified photos from the Nigerian government, and if I were to show them to kids in schools or teachers, I could get in legal trouble. And I also told him, well, why did you send them to me if they're classified? You shouldn't have sent them to me. You're the one at fault. He told me no, that he trusted me and I should trust him as he's made me a promise that I would not show the photos. And then he asked if I've talked about our relationship to anyone. And I told him, what relationship? We're just kind of like chat friends online. We hardly talk, we hardly know each other, we say hi and bye. And he told me that he was falling in love with me. I told him, well, you hardly know me. I hardly know you, and for you to fall in love with me is a little concerning and a little too quick. Chris again then asked me if I'm dating anyone online, and I told him no. My dog, my house, my work, school, all that is what matters. Chatting with you is fun, but I don't want to be in a relationship. Chris then asked me, and we started talking more about his wife who had passed and how he would never feel love again, but I had broken down the icy cold wall and that he had built it around his heart, and somehow I managed to break through. Well, I wasn't talking for that, and I told him I think he needs to get some therapy first and work through the grief before you instantly fall in love with a stranger you've never met in person. He then said that he had to go, and he would talk to me later. I didn't think much of it, and my work days got busy. While I'm on summer vacation, I volunteer at the school a couple days a week, cleaning up, painting, different kinds of projects. And even though I always say I'm going to take the summer off, I always end up volunteering. Chris came back again and asked how I was doing. And I told him, wonderful. I'm doing what I got to do. And this time I said, summer vacation's good, but I'm also working at the school volunteering. I'm getting stuff ready, cleaning up the yard, cleaning up stuff, doing a painting project at the school. And I know I say I take time off, but like I told him, I'm honest. I love my work and I love volunteering to help. I also do summer vacation, was spent a couple weeks off, followed up by painting, helping the classroom floors, helping prepare for the new school year. And our kitchen cafeteria summers are way too short. And I'm a school district employee, so my heart's always at work. By this time, it had been a little over a month since I first met Chris, and he would message from time to time again asking how I was, and then always ask if I was dating somebody, what I was doing. And then, all of a sudden, he started to message every day, every morning, every afternoon, and every late evening, asking how I was doing. And I started chatting with him, and to be honest, during this time I was battling a little bit of a depression. See, during the summer when I was off from school, my parents and I always went somewhere. Even as an adult, I would take them somewhere for the summer for a couple of weeks, and this was during the time we normally went somewhere. So as I was battling this kind of grief and depression, I found myself talking to him. It kind of killed time and distraction. It didn't give me time to think about other things, and I know the sale of my parents' house has to be done, and I decided to share with him what was going on. I chatted with him briefly, telling him that I had to clean the house out and that a realtor is going to come and list the home for me. It's just something very hard to do, and that's when Chris turned very nice. He said he was there for me. He was praying for me, and that he knows how hard it is to lose someone that you love, especially parents. And he said that he hoped everything went well and that I was able to sell the house and emotionally move on. It was kind of weird because the original Chris I spoke to in chat, if this makes sense, wasn't really emotionally vested in talking about things. He was very straightforward with questions, asking my favorite food, favorite color, am I dating anybody? But this Chris I was texting with now was a little more emotional. He was a little more vested in what I had to say and actually replied to questions that I asked him. Where the previous chat with Chris, he always changed the subject or started talking about himself and work. And he liked to talk about me. This one asked how I felt, how I was. I felt like it was a different Chris. It was during this time I think that I was talking to two different people. Maybe three, because as this story continues, you'll see what happens. This Chris was very attentive to me. In fact, honestly, I can see why someone would fall for a romance scammer. He asked how I felt every day. He would wake me up with "Good morning, sunshine," thinking of you, and he even asked again if I could have my phone number and give it to him. Well, by this time I thought, sure, why not? What harm is it going to do? And we started to talk to each other via WhatsApp. He had a number from Texas. I didn't think much of it and thought maybe he was legit. But soon the red flags came out. And the first time he called me, he had a super thick accent. He talked very slowly and very quietly, almost like he was covering his mouth with a rag or some kind of disguise. I actually joked with him the first time we spoke and asked him if he was chewing on a wet sponge because he sounded like he had a mouthful of sponge and he was talking low, quiet, and slow. And I told him, "You have an interesting accent." Of course, he covered that up with saying different things. My parent was from here, my mom was from there, I lived here and went to school there. He told me in the beginning some things had changed. He told me that his son was doing well in boarding school and that he was ready to graduate high school. Well, the Chris I first talked to in the beginning had a daughter. I asked him, "What about your daughter?" "I didn't know you had a son." And he said, "No, I have a son. I don't have a daughter. I never told you I had a daughter." Followed by a very long pause on the phone. It was as if he was trying to look at notes or something or think back. I could just hear him just sighing, breathing harder, and he got quiet. He quit answering questions, and so far it was just a little bit more methodical. He would sit and think first. He then told me that his connection was poor and the job site where he was at, he would call me later. I told him that would be fine, and it was a pleasure chatting. Take care. Well, he called me later. He told me he was sorry he cut the call so short last time, but he's very busy with his construction project, and asked how I was doing. He asked if I'd eaten dinner and if I was feeling well, and to be honest, I was a little depressed. I was playing some of my mom's favorite songs, and I was thinking about how my mom and dad used to dance to this song in our kitchen when I was little, and I played the song for him. I was feeling vulnerable. I was feeling weepy. And I guess Chris picked up on that, and he told me he understood. He started singing me songs. Love songs, of course, and it pulled at my heartstrings. But I was in a vulnerable place, and actually listening to him sing took my mind off my sorrows, and it made me laugh, because his singing voice was so terrible. He couldn't sing his way out of a paper bag, and I giggled to myself. But I let him keep singing, and I told him that was very heartfelt, and I was so glad that he had been able to sing for me. He told me he was falling in love with me, and he'd never loved anyone as much as he loves me, besides his wife, of course, who had died. I asked him how he was dealing with the grief after losing his wife, and how he was feeling. The troublesome part of this was, when I worried about this, he said his little daughter, his poor little daughter, was missing her mother, and she would cry every night for her mother. This again perplexed me because looking back again, he said he had a daughter, then a son, no daughter, and now he's back to having a daughter and no son. I asked how his son is dealing with everything, and he said he just has a daughter, and then he became angry with me. I asked him if he's confusing or what's going on, and he accused me of confusing him with other men I'm talking to, that I must be speaking to lots of men online. Well, this was when I knew something was wrong. I asked him how the job site building was going, and he slipped up and told me it's very hard being out here in the ocean. The ocean? I thought you were doing constructions on roads and bridges in Nigeria. He paused. He didn't speak. And then he said, "No, I must be confusing him with another man that I talked to. I must be cheating on him with other men online, and that I'm getting confused. He says he works on an oil rig on oil pipelines in the Gulf Coast." Okay, now I know something's very wrong. And what do? I thought. Do I let it go? Do I hang up? Do I argue? Or do I play along? I had absolutely no feelings for this man, and quite frankly, this was becoming fun. I decided to take the high road, and I went ahead and played along. I told him, "Oh my gosh, being on the ocean must be so scary. I'm so sorry. I was confusing you with my little brother. He's building roads and bridges, and I get confused." Chris told me that's okay. It happens a lot. And that he was on the oil rig, and he would be off the oil rig soon, but it would take at least another 2 months. And that he was going to fly home. I asked him what it's like being on the Gulf Coast, and I told him I've been to the Gulf before, back in the 90s. My parents and I actually went one time, and I started reminiscing about them. And during this conversation, and I started feeling a little sentimental and a little down. Grief can hit you at the wildest times. I miss them so much. Chris told me that it was very rough here and that he started talking about how the night before last, and he didn't want to bring it up with me before, they were attacked by sea pirates. Well, I thought at first, because of his accent, it was so thick and he mumbled a lot, I thought he was talking about some kind of parasite. And I said, well, are you okay? Do you need a doctor? In my head, I thought he meant like a sea parasite. Like maybe they drank some seawater or bad food or something happened to him out in the sea. Pirates. Pirates, he kept saying. They attacked the ship. Well, again, I was a little confused and I said, well, how many people are sick? He said, nobody is sick. The pirates have attacked our ship. They tried to take everything. And then he said, a pirate stole his iTunes gift card, and I thought to myself, pirates on the Gulf Coast near Texas? Right, okay. He said, yes, I'm near Houston, but off the Gulf Coast, and that's when I knew this guy wasn't the full deck. I knew something was wrong. I asked him what happened. What did they take off your ship? And again, I thought you were on an oil rig, but now it's a ship. And he told me that they took iTunes cards. He said everyone that works on the rig, again, back to rig and not ship, carries iTunes cards of $1,000 worth so that they can make phone calls to their wives. And he uses iTunes cards to call me. And he said the pirates took everyone's iTunes cards, and, well, the logical thinker in me thought, how did the pirates know you had iTunes cards and that's all they took? I asked him, did they take anything else? Just those darn iTunes cards? He said, yeah, a few people escaped and fell overboard because they were trying to battle the pirates. I thought, wow, this is like a real-life Disney movie or some kind of B-rate horror flick. I asked him if he was hurt, and he said no. He ran across the ship. Again, we're on a ship again, not a rig. And found himself in the captain's quarters, and him and the captain hid underneath a bunker. And the pirates didn't get him, but unfortunately they rifled through his room and took his iTunes cards, but thankfully they didn't take his wallet or credit cards or money or anything personal. They were just after those iTunes cards, apparently. This is an epidemic happening in the Gulf right now. I wasn't aware, and I told him, well, that's terrible. And I asked him if he was okay, and he told me no. He said he's running out of minutes and he needs to check on his little daughter who's away at boarding school. At least this time he chose daughter. Last time he said son. And he asked me if I could get him a $1,000 iTunes card. I told him, do they even sell cards of that high denomination? I said, I've never seen one. And he told me they do. And he says, if not, get two $500 ones, scratch the back, take a picture and send it to me. Give it to him right away, he said. I need to check on my daughter. I asked him, well, where's your daughter? Is she back home? No, she's at an international boarding school in Norway. Norway? I thought she was in the U.S. He said, no, she's in Norway. He said he had tried to email the headmaster of the Norwegian boarding school, but he doesn't have a Wi-Fi connection. I guess the pirates stole that too. And he could use his iTunes cards to use his phone to make calls and try to email, but he's running out of minutes. I told him I didn't realize iTunes cards bought minutes on phones. He said, of course they do. You don't know. Do you own an iPhone? I told him, no, I have an Android. And he told me that's why I don't know any better. Just go get the card. Well, we continued this conversation, and I just told him that it's late at night. I'm not going out in the middle of the night to get you an iTunes card. And he told me to get one tomorrow. He said, aren't you off work? Don't you work until end of summer? I told him, yes, but again, I'm volunteering at the school doing some extra project work. He then asked me how much money I'm getting paid to work extra. I told him nothing. And this is when he became enraged and he asked me, what do I do? What do you mean? What is the meaning of this? Why are you working and not getting money? I told him, yeah, it's called volunteer work. I volunteer at the school. It's a public school. Our fundings are low. And I volunteer to help clean up the classrooms before summer vacation ends. And I just try to get things ready for the community. It's actually a really low-income school, and we like to make it nice for the kids, and we just volunteer our time and get together and clean up the place. We even do community garage sales for the school to help earn money for some of the more lower-income kids. He told me that I was lying. Nobody works for free. If I'm going to have a charity, I might as well be with someone that loves him and give him the money instead. Go get the card. I told him no, the children are more important, and they get my time. You have a job. You can get an iTunes card with all the money you make on your oil rig ship. The kids deserve time, attention, and nice classrooms when they get back from their summer break. Well, he didn't understand this, and he told me he had to go, that he would reach out to me later, and he stopped talking. I had a good laugh and thought, this is going to be fun. I continued my conversation with Chris, and this is part 1 of a series. As I said, this lady has a very long story to tell, and we'd love to share regarding Chris, because the story keeps changing. So stay tuned for part 2 as we share her encounter with Chris, the ever-changing romance scammer.